This episode is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Head to cardkingdom.com/studies to pick up Hogaak, Bridge from Below, Vengevine, and any other busted graveyard cards that your overgrown heart desires. Browse the sealed products of the site for great deals on the latest Magic sets, then pick up a box of Modern Horizons for game night. The set was a fan-favorite draft experience that I highly recommend to any enfranchised player. No matter your Magic needs, Card Kingdom provides high-quality products and responsive customer service, and will ship your entire order all in one package. This episode is crowdfunded by my ongoing supporters on Patreon. I'm running a special promo for this video. Sign up at the $5 level before the end of August and receive a signed and numbered Hogaak from me. At the highest tier, you'll also receive a signed copy of Baleful Strix, as well as a small sticker delivered in a handwritten envelope. Other perks include access to my Discord and my podcast, as well as your name in the credits of the videos. This channel has always been a DIY labor of love, and my patrons are the heart and soul of every video project. Thanks so much for the support. There's this Elton John song that's been stuck in my head for a couple months, ever since I started thinking about that fateful summer of 2019. It starts like this.
That has been absolutely dominating Modern all weekend long. We're going to get ready to watch it in action one more time here this weekend, and who knows, we could have a Hogaak mirror here in the finals. Dominic Harvey's going to join.
Every now and then, a completely busted Magic card sneaks its way past the watchful eye of R&D and nestles into the foil wrappings of a booster pack.
This Magic card? Yeah, this one was probably a little too messed up.
Once discovered, cards like these tend to take center stage rather quickly, and in spectacular fashion.
This is incredible. This is turn 2, everybody at home. That's 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 power.
Before long, a star is born.
Gaak, you get my Vengevine back. We're done. We're done. This game is over.
A few years back, one card put on a performance that defied the rules of modern Magic and left everyone singing the words to a song they never wanted to hear. That dreadful dirge played on repeat for 73 straight days, between May and August of 2019, an infamous stretch of time.
It was the summer of the Gaak.
Like all great retellings of harmless disasters, this story starts with a tweet. On May 29, 2019, Mark Rosewater previewed Hogaak, Arisen Necropolis to a cautiously curious audience of Magic players. The card occupied a rare slot in the highly anticipated novelty project Modern Horizons, a supplemental summer set that moonlit as a, quote, love letter to Time Spiral. 3 principles guided the set's design. First and foremost, it catered to experienced players by embracing high mechanical complexity for deeper and richer gameplay. 43 different keywords were sprinkled across its 254 cards, sometimes appearing twice on a single design, like the very strange Throes of Chaos, which is the only sorcery in existence with no innate spell ability. Secondly, the team leaned into tongue-in-cheek references and deep-cut allusions to the game's greatest hits, but with restraint. Cards like Smiting Helix and Pondering Mage lent a nod to famous designs and historic moments from Magic's past, but they lacked the overtly slapstick tone of the unsets. The goal was to pay homage and evoke nostalgia, while avoiding the sour twist of irony. Finally, as the name implies, the third goal was to push the modern format beyond its boundaries with a real good shakeup. For the first time at such a large scale, cards printed in this set would skip standard entirely and become legal in all Eternal formats. This direct-to-VHS approach allowed for stronger yet riskier concepts, like riffing on Force of Will and taking a second swing at a 2-mana Planeswalker. Wrenn and 6 made an immediate impression on the format in the traditional Jun's list. Hogaak, on the other hand, was written off by some as another wacky legend for Commander. Others, however, could envision a Hogaak-riddled future quickly approaching, like a meteorite ripping through the atmosphere. While scouring these old posts from May, I found countless replies to the previewed card that read like prophecy. Lurking just beneath Modern's Tier 1 metagame were Dredge and Graveyard enthusiasts alike, and these players saw Hogaak as the missing payoff piece their decks needed to put them over the top. And they were right. On June 5th, 2019, Twitch streamer 2Vito posted a primer of a new take on Bridgevine, claiming that Altar of Dementia plus Hogaak presented a very real upgrade to the archetype. 4 days later, the same user posted again, this time to the entire Magic subreddit, claiming a 79% win rate in league play on MTGO, and advocating for a serious discussion about the Arisen Necropolis. Vito offered two hypotheticals. Either they had suddenly become the greatest player of all time, or the format was on the brink of fallout. It is important to note that this post arrived 5 days before Modern Horizons officially released in paper. Magic Online users were granted early access to the cards for playtesting and marketing purposes after the pre-release, and deck builders like Vito took the initiative to give these never-before-seen designs a run for their money. As a quick aside, the price of One With Nothing skyrocketed to $14 a copy this same week in speculation of the Hogaak hype, which I still find to be a hilarious detail of this story. Here's the deck, titled Bridgevine of Dementia, that Vito designed and piloted through these early modern leagues. The idea was quickly adopted by Pyotr Glagovsky, a talented pro player who lent it some legitimacy and exposure with this tweet. In the list were 12 one-drops that sent cards directly to the graveyard, which made casting Hogaak on turn 2 easy and reliable. Stitcher Supplier was especially strong, as it provided mana for Convoke and served as an early board chump blocker with upside. 10 fetch lands contributed to the delve costs, as did the Dredge 5 ability on Stinkweed Imp. This card would eventually prove too slow and unfocused, but it spoke to the main game plan: fill up the graveyard as quick as possible. 4 Bloodghasts and 4 Vengevines traced the second layer of the deck's design. Properly sequencing creatures and lands on turn 2 became a crucial element of gameplay, as best exemplified by Dylan Donegan here at the Columbus Modern Open. After pitching 2 Vengevines to Faithless Looting on turn 1, Donegan opened his second turn with an Insolent Neonate. He immediately sacrificed the Neonate and discarded a third Vengevine to draw a card. Next, he brought out Stitcher Supplier off a Gemstone Mine, which counted as his second creature cast for the turn, triggering all 3 Vengevines and returning them to the battlefield. On ETB, Supplier milled 3 cards, one of which was none other than the Gaak.
If you have another creature to play, which you, oh boy. Oh no. The Gaak.
Tapping 3 to Convoke and exiling 4 to Delve paid for Hogaak's 7 mana casting cost, giving Donegan an 8/8 Trampler on turn 2. This board state, right here, this defined the summer of the Gaak.
Basically, if he just plays Hogaak against Mono Red Phoenix, it's really hard to lose. I mean, turn 2 Hogaak with the Vengevine in play, I mean, this game is basically just over.
What's more is this wasn't even the primary win condition of version 1.0. The combo kill leveraged the same scenario on display here, but went one step further to instantly mill the opponent's entire library. With at least 1 copy of Bridge from Below in the graveyard, plus an Altar of Dementia in play, players could initiate the loop by sacrificing their creatures and milling themselves. Every time a creature hit the bin from the battlefield, Bridge generated 1 zombie token. With Hogaak and at least 2 bridges in the graveyard, this loop became infinite, and with enough zombie tokens assembled, sacrificing all of them to Altar could mill the opponents completely out of cards and win the game on the spot.
16 zombies represents mill for 32, so I can mill my opponent out, and it's hard to imagine what they can do to stop it.
On June 11th, 3 days before the release of Modern Horizons in paper, pro player Tom White tweeted this screenshot of a recent match playing blue-whites in Modern. It's his turn 1 on the draw, and he has a tapped Hollowed Fountain in play. His opponent has assembled the Gaak. In this image, I see just how quickly the paradigm shifted for players of Magic's most accessible Eternal format. The rug had fully been pulled from beneath their feet, and a new age of tech had forcibly arrived. Hogaak made the control deck look comically obsolete. 3 days later, on the release day for Modern Horizons, Patrick Chapin and Michael Flores posed a provocative question on their podcast. Is it already time to ban Hogaak, Arisen Necropolis?
Part of what makes this strategy so busted is that it's very, very robust. The cards work really well all the other ways. Like, you don't have to just be doing the A game. It's B, C, D, and E game is all very good, very abusive. It's so much faster that it plays like a legacy dredge deck, and in fact, in many ways, plays as fast as a vintage dredge deck. I think it's completely broken in half.
June 21st brought in the summer solstice. The sun was rising, the beaches were open, and someone was turning up the radio. July 1st, 2019 was a Monday. The Gaak was out of the bag. Over the weekend, 19 Bridgevine decks made top 32 at the Team Modern Open in Pittsburgh, including a first-place finish by Dominic Harvey and company. Players everywhere were scouring for answers to Modern's greatest growing threat. The first candidate was a familiar staple in surgical extraction. The idea was simple enough: extract the Gaak and neuter the combo. In practice, Surgical and its accompanying suite of, quote, soft hate cards like Nile Spellbomb and Ravenous Trap folded to the potency of the 1 and 2 drop creatures. Even without the 8/8 at their flank, they could effectively chip away at the opponent's empty board all by themselves.
Because their Vengevines are coming back, the Bloodghasts are coming back, they have all these little dorks, plus all the bridge tokens, plus they can mill you out.
The second option was Lavinia, Azorius Renegade. This card offered a hard counter to Hogaak, but it was far too slow on the draw, and as Reddit user Sky commented quite flippantly, it costs mana. Then perhaps Tormod's Crypt could help stem the bleeding. After all, it was free to cast and every deck could play it.
It's not that Tormod's Crypt does nothing.
But yeah, it did nothing. After one activation and without adding to the board, Bridgevine would simply rebuild. Thus, returning to the hardest-hitting anti-graveyard tech in the modern card pool became the only legitimate option. The first shift in the metagame was found in an uptick in sideboard copies of Rest in Peace, and the best of all the options, Leyline of the Void, which could come down as early as turn 0. Some decks began to hinder their own opening hands and aggressively mulligan exclusively for this silver bullet. And still, it didn't matter. The Gaak adapted right back.
And so now here comes an Assassin's Trophy to take care of the Leyline.
Assassin's Trophy and Force of Vigor gave the Bridgevine decks answers to the answers and kept their on-the-play win rate well above 66% according to data on Magic Online. This, combined with a slurry of 5-0 trophies in the Modern Leagues and an upcoming high-profile Mythic Championship in Barcelona, forced Wizards' hand. So on July 8th, 2019, they announced an emergency banning of Bridge from Below.
It's Deck Tech time, and I've got Pyotr Glogowski here, MPL member and streamer under the handle Candacer, and we're playing Hogaak this weekend, which, no Bridge from Below anymore. Still good enough?
Certainly, yes. I'm actually not entirely sure if the deck is any worse than it was before, given that the ban forced it to adapt in a way that might have made it contextually better for the format, so that's pretty spooky.
Yeah, spooky is the right word for it, especially...
105 players in total brought Hogaak to the tournament in Spain, including Pro Tour Hall of Famer Seth Manfield. In an article written from the event site, he claimed that playing Hogaak was a bit of a gamble. His team expected an abundance of graveyard hate to be upgraded from the sideboard and placed directly into the main deck. Manfield was correct in this prediction. A nearly unprecedented 836 copies of Leyline of the Void populated the tournament hall that weekend.
So, both players putting Leylines into play. We got Sam Black with one. Handy opens up with a Force of Vigor, exiling what looks like an Assassin's Trophy in order to take out Samuel Black's Leyline of the Void, just like that.
But once again, it didn't matter. The Hogaak decks accumulated a 56% win rate in non-mirror matchups and compensated weaker drafters with easier constructed wins. This cushioned their overall records and skewed the results further. This trend overflowed into the weeks following. Across the Grand Prix circuits at the end of July, Hogaak tallied 13 top 8s in 4 tournaments. The banning of Bridge from Below backfired and forced the deck to become even more focused. In place of Altar of Dementias were a bunch of cheap recurring zombies that synergized with the graveyard fillers and helped cast Hogaak more consistently. Frank Karsten ran the numbers. A turn 2 Hogaak was possible 60% of the time on the play. Theoretically, if it cost 8 mana instead of 7, it was still more likely to show up on turn 2 than not, And at 9 mana, you'd have a turn 2 Hogaak at the exact same rate that Steph Curry hits a 3-pointer, 42% and change.
Chantel mulliganed this game, and her opponent turn 1 Inquisitioned her on the play this game before she had the opportunity to play anything. And this is turn 2 of this game. Look at this board. This is not her rare nut draw. This is a mulligan, and then her opponent played a discard spell on turn 1. How can I give good strategical analysis of this game?
No amount of ley lines and the like could simmer down the sweltering sun. The summer was getting hotter. Players were fired up. On August 6, 2019, writer David Ernenvine took a hard look at the data gathered from the previous week's tournaments and scratched his head. Half the data, he writes, said that Hogaak was a busted dominant deck. The other said it was successful, but only as a function of its popularity. After Barcelona, ban Hogaak became the rallying cry of the player base, but Ernenvine offered a different argument. Hogaak is a very powerful deck, but not necessarily a good one. He expanded this position. First and foremost, Hogaak was no Eldrazi Winter. The former relied on a single explosive creature to take an early advantage, while the latter offered thorough consistency across all of its threats. The Eldrazi decks in their best starts could attack for lethal on turn 2, and at their worst could overrun opponents with individual card quality. Eldrazi also had modular abilities that could be tuned to counter specific matchups. Card Market recently ran an experiment pitting these two decks against one another, and Ernenvine's hypothesis was more or less proven correct. Eldrazi emerged a victor and a favorite. The Hogaak deck, Ernenvine posited, was instead closer to decks like Modern Neoform and Legacy Belcher. These were so-called critical components combo builds that fell anemic if the pieces appeared out of sequence. Rewatching the tape from Barcelona provided many examples of Hogaak fumbling. Jelger Wiegerschma put on a fireworks show in Game 1 of Round 16, but he faced an equally explosive opener from Izzet Phoenix in Game 2.
Turn 2 Hogaak, not good enough.
Not even close to good enough.
In Game 3, Jelger stumbled through the early turns and lost the edge to the reach of the red deck, forcing a concession and elimination from a spot on Sunday. Martin Muller, the only Hogaak player to make top 8, faced a similar fate. Despite finding Hogaak on turn 2, Muller was forced into chump blocking a 12-12 Arcbound Ravager in the quarterfinals before being booted from the tournament altogether. Around the same time, Hall of Famer Gabriel Nassif took Hogaak through a Modern League and finished with a meager 2-3 record. His losses looked just as hopeless.
I can't win. I don't even know why I'm still playing.
Ernenvine compounded his argument with a nod to the London Mulligan as another potential boon to the deck. It may have been that extra look at one card was the real culprit of Hogaak's overperformance. Furthermore, the tournament report suggested that Tron was overall the better and more consistent combo deck. It took first place at the SCG Open in Columbus the same weekends that it won the Mythic Championship, and it also made top 8 at the accompanying Grand Prix in Barcelona. Funny how time turns back on itself. I really like this article. Instead of posing a contrarian take for the thrill of it, this piece asked legitimate questions about Hogaak's omnipresence as driven by data and experience. At this point, the deck embodied the paradox of dredge in every eternal format, a self-consuming cycle that perpetuates its own metagame. What if Hogaak was winning so much because so many people were playing it? What if the format overcompensated because of high-profile visibility? The deck, after all, was beatable, so what if we didn't give the format enough time to course correct on its own? These questions were more or less answered a week later on August 11th, when Hogaak appeared in 5 of the top 8 decks at Magic Fest Minneapolis, and in 19% of the decks overall. It was about now that a new phenomenon arose, something I can only describe with the analogy of a lobster kicking back, relaxing, and enjoying the boil. A total acceptance of the heat wave brought on by the summer. The legend himself, Ryan Overturf, tweeted it best. Cons, totally broken. Pros, the Gaak is a cool nickname. He leaned further and further into the bit as the sun baked its way through August, and so did Michael Clifford, who published an article titled The Last Hogaak Guide, a death knell primer for the upcoming Magic Fest in Las Vegas at the end of the month. Although it was unconfirmed, everybody had the feeling that this would be the Gaak's final show of the tour, the retirement party, the last chance to dance. And because of that, dare I say that this event carried with it a jovial bliss. As Clifford recommended in the sign-off, goldfish a ton, get used to the sequencing, and enjoy the last tournament of the Hogaak era. You are making history. Even TCG Player celebrated the send-off with this promo, offering bonus bucks on singles if a certain card just happened to get banned the following week. It was 104 degrees Fahrenheit in Las Vegas on Sunday, August 25th, 2019. In the convention center just off Paradise Road, 8 players battled for the share of a $65,000 prize pool. Of them, 2 brought Tron, and 1 brought Urza, leaving the 5 remaining pilots on the Gaak. Simon Nielsen won the whole thing with this list, which included a Miser Altar of Dementia, like some poetic tribute to 2 Vito's very first list. The next day, on August 26, 2019, Ian Duke published the banned and restricted announcement on the mothership. Hogaak made the list, and the sun set just a little earlier that evening. Between May and August of 2019, for 73 straight days, Hogaak Arisen Necropolis ran rampage through the modern format and forever altered how we assess powerful Magic cards. Many of the earliest reactions to the card offered an eerie prediction of what actually transpired later that summer. Even now, the collateral effects of Hogaak's dominance are still felt in the format. Both Bridge from Below and, more controversially, Faithless Looting fell victim to the summer of the Gaak. They haven't seen the light of day since, and I still wonder if Stitcher's Supplier wasn't the true linchpin. I've covered Magic long enough to know that problematic cards will always have their time in the sun. The older I get, the more I'm learning to enjoy the boil. If anything, Hogaak was one hell of a fun Magic deck to play. Even the haters have to give it that. About 6 weeks after the banning, in early October 2019, Wizards of the Coast introduced an all-new Magic plane with Throne of Eldraine. Lurking in this set was a new breed of boogeyman, a menace, a king rising to infamy. But that's a tale for another time. My final sponsor for this episode are Cook and Becker, who are celebrating the history and artwork of Magic the Gathering through a series of premium licensed art prints. Debuting now is the 30th Anniversary Summer Collection, which features 5 hand-selected pieces as standard digital prints and deluxe screen prints. Each print comes with a certificate of authenticity and will only be available for the duration of their respective season. As an additional perk, the team is also printing an exclusive not-for-sale piece that is extremely limited and numbered. The rare drop for the summer collection is the one and only Black Lotus. These will appear at random to those who order a premium edition art print. Follow my affiliate link below to purchase a high-quality Magic art print for your game room or office, and best of luck finding the Lotus. In an offhand conversation with me about Siege Rhino, principal game designer Andrew Brown once described Standard as a rotating staircase, an Escher-esque environment where kingpins rise and fall at a healthy rate. Recently, many players have been examining the modern ban list through a similar lens. The former powers of formats long past are not the cards they used to be. I wonder when that staircase will return back on itself. For the record, I expect Splinter Twin will return far before Birthing Pod ever will. I looked at a lot of Hogaak lists for this video, and 2 features stuck out most to me. First, by the end of its dominance in Modern, a core of 32 cards were considered unchangeable. Fine-tuning competitive decks has always fascinated me, especially when it comes to singleton copies of cards like in Simon Nielsen's list, but I'm not sure if any other Tier 1 list was this streamlined this fast. Secondly, the Hogaak decks only ran 20 lands, sometimes even 19 plus Dryad Arbor, and included fetch lands. In this way, the deck played like a low-curve aggro deck, often needing only 2 lands in play to fully go off. It's kind of amazing to me. If you made it this far, do me a favor and sign up for the Patreon page. $5 before August gets you a signed Gaak and your name in the credits alongside all these generous people. Thanks so much for watching.